Hey there, my name's Curtis Lucas and you're watching Empire Building. Now, in this episode, we're going to be talking about what's going on in China. By now, almost everyone is familiar with China's second largest land developer, Evergrande. It's widely expected that they will default on loan payments that are required by this Thursday. And some of those deadlines have already passed. And while we do have some people that are sounding the alarm, calling this a Lehman Brothers moment for China, but there are even more people out there right now that are widely dismissing this as having little to no impact. I mean, really, what's $300 billion worth of debt in the broad scheme of things? And let's face it, it's in China. It's not even in North America. So how much impact could this really have on us? I decided to dig a little deeper into this, and what I found was pretty shocking. And it's led me to believe that this could have significant impacts on the global economic markets. So if you do find any of this content valuable, it would be a big help if you hit the like button for the YouTube algorithm. And if you haven't already done so, subscribe to the channel. So I haven't done a video like this in quite a while, but it's important enough that I thought it was important to address this topic. And needless to say, this is a very complex and nuanced issue. Certainly not something I could cover in the span of 10 or 15 minutes in a simple video and actually give you a well-rounded understanding of exactly what's going on over there. But if I'm right, and this does turn into a far more significant issue, we're going to have all kinds of time to talk about this. Or perhaps I'm wrong and this will just be a one-off and we'll just try never to talk about it again. The point is, China is the second largest economy in the world. There's just no getting around that whatever happens over there affects all of us. And what is happening over there right now, and not just right now, for the last 10 years, has been nothing short of insanity. I mean, it's complete bonkers. The pace at which development and construction of real estate in that country that has been occurring over the last 10 years has been nothing short of astounding. The generation of wealth and the number of people uplifted out of poverty has been nothing short of spectacular. But as with all booms, we know, without a doubt, they do come to an end. The hard part is knowing when that end might be and what exactly the consequences will be when that happens. Real estate in China by far makes up the largest portion of wealth in that country. And for more than just the same reasons that we're accustomed to. And like I said, this is a very complex and nuanced reality, requiring an understanding of that culture and the many ways it's different from most other countries around the world.
Now, these other two reasons potentially pale in comparison to the third driver of the insane house prices we see in China, which is the societal pressure to own a home. You might think this is nothing unique. In the US, everyone from prominent financial advisors to your know-it-all in-laws will talk endlessly about the need to buy a house. But China takes this social pressure and turns it up to 11. Given the one-child policy causing an imbalance of men and women in the nation, a lot of Chinese gentlemen have found it almost impossible to get married without owning a home. Beyond that, there are very real structural advantages to owning a home. The Chinese population is heavily restricted by what is known as the hukou system, which basically tracks household registration. This system tracks where people's primary residence is, and from that decides where they will have access to public services like healthcare and education for their children. The internal migrant population within China is huge. A lot of rural residents leave their small villages to move to city centres, where they can attract significantly higher wages. The problem is that these migrant workers will still technically be residents of their small village, which will mean that they won't have access to even the most basic public services in their cities that they are living and working in because of this hukou system. This would be like not being able to send your kid to a public school in San Francisco because you were unlucky enough to be born in North Dakota. Now, the solution to this problem on an individual level is to buy a house. Sure, it may be extremely expensive, but if you share a room with 10 colleagues and save everything you earn while getting a loan from friends, family, and a bank, maybe you'll be able to afford a small one-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of one of these cities. It may not be ideal, but Once you have the deed to that household, you are in, and you're no longer a second-rate citizen in the city that you call home.
The clip I just played there was from a great channel I've been following a long time now called Economics Explained. I'll leave a link to the full video down in the description below. I highly recommend, if you're interested in this topic and want to understand more fully exactly what's going on over there, watch that video. So that way I don't have to spend a whole bunch of time covering a lot of the topics he's already done such a good job on. But now with this new development, with China's second largest developer going bankrupt, going insolvent, unable to pay its debts to the tune of $300 billion. Yes, obviously that's a lot of money, but it doesn't seem like that much money when you compare that to the size of their GDP overall, or even the market cap of one bank in the United States. But you have to realize that the situation in China isn't about one company. And while they may claim that the others don't have the same systemic issues as this one particular developer has, the market overall has been propped up in such a way that even the government hasn't been able to clamp down on the participants in that market from over speculating. And it's not even their fault. The incentives and disincentives in China have created a marketplace that rewards that type of behavior. The way property is developed over in China these days is unlike anything the world has ever seen. Entire ghost cities being constructed with no people. And this has continued on and on and on with almost no end in sight. People have been calling for the top of this market for years, and it has continued to surge further. But up until now, the government has always been able to stand behind and bail out anything if it got into too much trouble. But now it seems the will to do such a thing may not be there anymore. Or perhaps it's not so much the will, but the ability. I think it's possible that at this point the government has realized things have gotten way out of control. And if they decide to bail out this company, then they will have no choice but to bail out anybody else. And propping up a house of cards like this that has been left unchecked for an entire decade could prove to be too much, even for the Chinese government. And I, for one, find it very hard to believe that the exposure, that even banks around the world don't have any exposure to this situation. I don't care what Jim Cramer says.
I am sorry. I won't look. We know we have to deal with 3 or 4 days of people who don't know what they're talking about coming on and talking about contagion. All I can tell you is we wish we had contagion. We're not allowed in. Our banks are the safest banks in the world because we have just been told by China forever, good luck, you're not coming in.
Just because the banks are told they're not allowed into China doesn't mean they didn't find some clever way to get money into that country through, say, the Cayman Islands. But even leaving that aside, a situation like this, if it spirals out of control, the impact will be felt worldwide. We're already having extreme supply chain problems. We've already stressed that system nearly to the breaking point. If the world's manufacturer of goods goes down, supply chains are going to have an impossible time meeting demand. And the ripple effects of such a downturn is very hard to predict, but could be catastrophic. Now, obviously, I don't want to get branded as the FUD spreader, but this is something we need to be aware of. I could be completely wrong about this. But when we've been looking at sky-high valuations across the board, it doesn't take a genius to know that we're at an increased level of risk at this point. Part of the other problem is that there has been a long-standing issue with the quality of construction of most of these developments. What people are soon going to realize is that they've invested millions of dollars in properties that aren't worth anything at all and are basically uninhabitable, even though they may only be a few years old.
Before we continue, I just wanted to point out the construction quality that's going on here. Sure. A little earlier, I was messing around with this just because, and you know, you can pull it apart by hand, and it's actually got wood inside. Look at that, it's wood, or at least some kind of, I'm not quite sure if it's twine or wood or fiberglass or whatever, but this is not a very sturdy structure. And as you can see, half the tiles have fallen off, and it's,
I want you to give them more details of this place before I tell them how old it is.
Okay. Well, I mean, we can look around and you can just look, it's in a very bad state of disrepair. Tiles have fallen off the walls have cracked and are falling down. Actually, there are balconies up there that have collapsed.
Yeah, shit, dude, look at this.
Yeah, balconies up there that have completely collapsed. Wow. In fact, roofs that have collapsed, and there's all sorts of things going on. It's in a horrible state of disrepair. Anyway, Seamilk, did we not see this place actually? Did we not see this place actually get built?
It was about 3 years ago. This is before ADV China.
Yeah.
In some cases, the construction was so shoddy, buildings literally fell over. The word that people have been using to describe the situation is China contagion. And no, we're not talking about the COVID. What they're talking about is whether or not there is a systemic issue, something that's deep rooted, something that's not easily simply plucked out and removed to control risk. I think the very nature of this issue proves that it is systemic. This is not one company. Just last month on August 27th, a $1 billion development was demolished after sitting incomplete for a number of years.
3, 2, 1, fire!
And this story is playing out around China over and over and over again. How long can a system like this persist before the bottom falls out? And that's the tricky part of this. The reality is this has been going on far too long. We are way past the expiration date here. And we're now just seeing the first signs that this could come tumbling down. What are the odds that the Chinese government is able to salvage this and save it? I would argue that it is way past their control at this point. And just as the Lehman Brothers was only an early warning sign, a canary in the coal mines, as it were, the underlying more systemic issues will reveal themselves after the fact. And it will become so painfully obvious to everyone. And we will all ask ourselves, why do we keep making the same mistakes over and over and over again? And you may be wondering, well, okay, if this is true, how is this going to impact cryptocurrencies? I mean, what does that have to do with real estate in China? Well, unfortunately, the reality is, now that we do have institutional investors involved in cryptocurrencies, in a situation where we have a perception of increased uncertainty, the first things to get unwound are the high-risk assets. Now, I don't know what that means for future prices in this situation. And in the long run, I'm still as bullish as ever in these technologies. And I'm going to continue to work hard to educate people to understand exactly what this technology is and the problems that it can solve. Because the problem that we're witnessing right now is another one that I believe in time could be resolved using these technologies, could make these things better. But we're not in that future yet. I would like to be able to sit here every day and say I'm 100% sure that we're headed to 100,000 by the end of the year. I know that's a target that a lot of people have in mind, which also suggests it's probably less likely. I also understand why most YouTubers would shy away from something like this because, let's face it, nobody wants to listen to Debbie Downer. And obviously, if everybody panicked and sold everything they had, that would only cause the market to crash. I'm not saying to sell it all. The only suggestion I would make is to ask yourself, what would you do if the completely unexpected happened? What would you do if Bitcoin actually slid and dropped below $20,000? Now, I know for a Bitcoin bull, that just seems unreasonable, unimaginable. But if it did happen, could you take advantage of it? Would you take advantage of it? I find that in this space, there is a tendency for people to be fully invested. They don't want to miss out on any of those gains. And in the long run, I do believe that could be a winning strategy. But don't do it with money that you might need in the near future. Make sure you've got your nest egg. Make sure you've got a buffer, just in case things go wrong. And just in case the opportunity to buy at substantially lower prices presents itself. So like I said, I'm going to be keeping a close eye on the situation as it evolves. But let me know what you think down below in the comments. Does this make any sense to you? Do you think I'm overreacting? Share your thoughts down below. That's all for this one. Now let's get back to empire building.